with us. Just slight information. I will be just taking a few minutes just to just to go around some of the very basics elements before introducing myself and the content, because we still have quite a lot of people coming in currently. So just in terms of information about today's attendance, we've got people from 35 different countries. So basically, the sun is always shining on someone who's in this webinar. And we've got lots of different industries as well represented, including people from the service industry, people from more classic manufacturing world. So that's really really nice to have all of you with us today. And I can still see quite quite a growing audience. And I've got some people wishing us a good morning. So Giuseppe, good morning. And we've got also some people telling us they've got Mike and Dong Mei from Shanghai who have joined together. So yes, I know some of you decided to have a sort of small groups to attend the presentation. So I will just say a few words about the setup for the webinar. So on your screen somewhere you will see a little flag. So if you want to change the language of the interface, this is where you can go. So you can use the flag to choose the right language that will support the webinar. Then something quite important is the chat. So the what you will be able to use during all the presentation. So of course you can post questions in the chat anytime, but also reactions. Any kind of comment, thought, afterthought. Just don't hesitate to share some of your points. I will stop at different steps in the presentation. I will look back at some of the comments, and I will, open a broader, discussion using this. So the more you're active in the chat, the better I can kind of respond, build on your contribution, and we can make this quite interactive. So still some more people joining. And just for information, we will be recording the webinar. So two things. You will have the possibility of accessing the slides in PDF format, and you will have the possibility to access the video recording of this webinar. So if you want to also share that with some of your colleagues, further discuss on the content, well, that's for you. This is an opportunity to just do that. So still more people joining in, but I'm gonna start to move in. So Marco is saying good morning, and someone, Pierre Hamelin, says he cannot hear. Silmara will be who is with me today, will be passing some message in order to help solve the problem. And good morning, Marco, one of my dear MBA students who's been doing a lot in the field of innovation from a purchasing standpoint. So always glad to see you here. Good. So my name is Hervé Legendre. I'm a professor of innovation at EIPM. I'm also the director of the EIPM Value Creation Observatory. And today we wanted to have the opportunity to come back on a broad perspective on the fundamentals of innovation in purchasing. Over the past 2 years, we've had quite a few webinars that were addressing very specific topics in terms of innovation in purchasing. We've looked at how to map ecosystems. We've discussed how to organize innovation workshops with suppliers. We've discussed how to develop an innovation culture within a purchasing context. But in the last webinars, we felt there was an appetite and some questions to, just to come back on some of the fundamentals. And indeed, what we see currently is a lot of purchasing team have started to put innovation on the agenda. This is now one of the goals. And they started some communication about this. They've established some workshop with some suppliers. They've developed some thinking around, do we need to get involved with startups? How should we be getting involved with startups? What do we need to simplify in order to support the onboarding of startups as a supplier in the companies? But going for innovation in purchasing definitely requires more profound and more holistic changes within purchasing organization. And really the idea of this webinar is to explore all the foundation, all the building blocks that are essential, all the key questions that we would really advise you to investigate if you want to go in that direction. What can we talk about? We will be looking at why innovation is on the purchasing agenda. This is a fundamental, not just for this session, but internally within purchasing team, we need to spend quite some time to explain within your specific context, your industry context, why this is important. Why today we have a role to play in procurement, in purchasing about innovation. We also need to demystify the word of innovation. We need to allow people to understand that this is not just about, radical, disruptive type of innovation, and this is not just about, the direct materials, things like this, but this is something broader, more holistic, and it can be about more incremental and more practical types of innovation. Then we'll discuss also about innovating with suppliers. What are the practices that makes a difference? I will do, I can't take you through the whole content we have here. I run a full 5-day weeks in our executive MBA on the topic, but I've picked two things: a few academic evidence, a few scientific evidence showing that companies who've adopted certain practices are related to innovating with suppliers are also the ones who've got the best financial and economic performance, and a sort of simple assessment tool that looks across different process aspects in terms of how you can develop the maturity of the organization in terms of innovating with suppliers. And then we'll be looking briefly, saying a few words about what it means in terms of measuring performance and how to sustain progress. So, okay, I think some of the technical problems have been, so we've got Marina asking for, okay, so, and yes, Dongmei, we will send a PDF version of the slides, so you have access both to the video and to the content. So now we've got full house, so we can go along with this. So what do we build on? And keep reacting, keep sending your comments, your reactions, your questions. So we've established 5 years ago. So this is our 5th anniversary, the Observatory for Value Creation at EIPM. When I joined the EIPM, I didn't have a background in purchasing. I had a background in innovation and business excellence. And I saw this would really going to be, a great opportunity to, see how companies would be finally taking on board some of these suppliers in terms of open innovation. Bringing innovation from outside and not just working on developing internally within the walls of the corporation innovation. So we conducted quite a number of studies. I will show you the public studies that are accessible for free on our website. So this is the observatory. We started with an overview of the innovation purchasing process, if you want. What are the different practice needed in order to make it happen, and how they impact on the business performance. The year after, this is already 4 years ago, we started to look into the impact of the Internet of Things and some fundamental digital transformation on the purchasing organization. So we wanted to look at where are the opportunities, where are the new practices that could contribute to give purchasing a role in this broader industry transformation. And this is really a key one that now we see everywhere. And we were quite early on this topic, and we keep working along these dimensions. We also had 3 years ago some work on the partnering with startups. The idea was really to look into what can be the contribution, what can be the role of purchasing, and what should be the point of attention and the good practice when your company is accessing some of startups as a supplier. Last year we worked on for more than a year. We worked on developing a purchasing culture within purchasing and beyond purchasing. So it's not just about the processes, it's not just about the technology, it's not about the specific practice related to startups, but it's a broader culture that needs to be developed and instilled in purchasing and procurement teams in order to contribute to innovation. All of these are freely available. On top of this, we've had some academic scientific publication in scientific journals. We've had also publication in the European Business Review, for instance, looking at mapping ecosystems and strategizing across ecosystems. So not just looking at supermarket, but at broader innovation ecosystems. This is one field where we've got a research project supported by TESAM and PIC, which is a French organization supporting the development of studies related to innovation with purchasing. And we're going to keep publishing this year some new elements about ecosystems, and we'll have something about this. So back to the bigger picture. What have we seen over the past 5 years? The first 2 years, we had to spend a lot of time explaining why innovation and what is innovation. We had to create some very specific perspectives that really helped people within purchasing to understand what was it about. So we've built a catalog of examples in order to, and I will be sharing quite a few later, trying to help people understand what we're talking about and demystifying, helping everyone understand. And this is something fundamental that they can make a contribution here in terms of contributing to innovation from a purchasing standpoint. So it's not just reserved to a pseudo elite, but this is something that we need as a more pervasive and distributed capabilities in purchasing. Then we spend quite some time asking questions, requests, and working with organizations, people, individuals on what's the process behind it. So what are the different building blocks in terms of practices? And the key point is there is not a single process that can, make it happen. You will need to use different practices, different building blocks that will respond to the very specific situation you need to address. This is the kind of agility we need to bring in order to achieve innovation. In many ways, you can bring innovation with suppliers without having an innovative supplier, or you might need to really go for a very innovative new supplier, a familiar partner. And this will require a very different approach and practices. Okay? So we've spent quite some time developing tools, practices, and studying how companies make it happen, how the leading organizations make it happen. And more recently, we really try to look into the questions of how do you institutionalize it? How do you create a cultural change within purchasing? So it's not just, a few I usually take the image of Hulk versus Peter Pan, classic buyer being Hulk. You know, they love to massify, use power, and at the end, they're a bit sad that we don't collaborate more. And Peter Pan being a little bit more maverick, you know, childlike, exploring different areas, playful, more innovative in spirit. And what we need is to create a culture where these two work together. So it's not about replacing one by another, but about creating a culture where the stakeholders and everyone within the purchasing organization has an understanding of what it takes and what are the values, what are the behaviors that support making it happen. Sometimes it's not so much about people understanding what they can do to support innovation, but it's also people in purchasing who understand why they shouldn't do to prevent it to happen. That's quite an important aspect as well. Very often we can contribute by simply not blocking some of the conversation between suppliers, internal stakeholders, and making sure things can move on. So why innovation? What is innovation? Let me go through a few slides. So on the why, this is a picture I've been using for many years already. This, if you want the story of purchasing. So I'm going to go very quickly on the first stage. You know, more than before 1870, we were in a world of entrepreneurs. So purchasing was done by, you know, the entrepreneur, the founder of the company, and it was done. And they were also doing the sales. They were going on to the main markets, and they were selling their product and buying at the same time. Then, starting in 1870, we started to see the development of the large companies in the railroad industry, and after for the electric business and chemical business. And this is a time where purchasing was very much on the forefront. Companies realize that suddenly they have a lot of they have some big suppliers in front of them. They needed some negotiation power. They understood that they were starting to, you know, buy in large scale, so they wanted to protect the value of the materials they were buying from outside. So purchasing became extremely important between 1870 and 1940. Then came the First World War, where purchasing started to lose some of its relevance. Why? Because after the First World War, I'm sorry if I said second one, after the First World War, the trade started to drop across countries. So we ended up with national champions, and because of the issue of security of raw materials, they started to develop vertical integration. So everything was done from beginning to end. The Ford Motor Company, the dream, the vision of Mr. Ford was to be able to do every single step of the process. He even bought some rubber plantation in order to access, you know, to the materials he needed for the tire. So the idea was to control the full value chain inside. In this context, purchasing was nearly irrelevant. It was just about securing raw materials, but this was a top management point of attention, and some planning, transactions, some internal logistics, very basic supply management. Then over time, trade started to reopen. We started to see value chain being, you know, sliced and diced, and we got to the 1980s with the development in the transportation technology and development in terms of political opening of frontiers, borders, reopening new space with regional development and globalization. Okay, and at that time, purchasing came back on the forefront with a key role in this, you know, global competition, focus on quality and increase outsourcing. A key role in terms of rationalizing a supplier base when the company was outsourcing some of its activities, managing risk in terms of when you go global, you're more exposed to new risk and you need to manage that, and also supporting some of the collaboration. So, you know, cost, risk, and collaboration became on top of the agenda of purchasing, and this was really coming back on the top management discussion room. And then we've moved since I used 2008 into a new world. And for me, this is the time of distant capabilities. Let me explain that. For many, many years, this value chain has been evolving and changing within certain industry boundaries. So you had a dedicated industry, the automotive industry, and most of the innovation were either coming from internal R&D being, developed within the some of the players within that industry, and not coming from other industries. Okay, we had some of the IT that supported some of the development, but most of the innovation was really coming from inside the industry. And today, what we see with the new landscape we have is we need to have access to capabilities coming from other industries. Companies have really reduced their scope of activity on their core business, and now they need to access innovation coming from a diversity of industrial sectors. We have no more, I would say, a chain, but we've got a broad, fragmented industry and an ecosystem that's really supporting companies. We see tech giants coming in every type of industries, whether we talk about Google, Amazon, Facebook. You've got these pictures showing that they're entering banking, they're entering media, they're entering health, they're entering all these sector of activities. And it's not just about competing, but it's also collaborating with them. That's so important today. And startups, they're back on the forefront. They're back in, contributing to the development of innovation all across. And, they don't simply fit the classic perspective in terms of, this is a traditional industry partners. And another strong element is the push to things differently in terms of sustainability, which is also forcing us to, not just see the industry as a chain, but more and more as a kind of circle where we try to reintegrate every elements we have coming in, but bringing them back in. So the circular economy, which is also changing the shape of industries. What does it mean for innovation? It means for purchasing. It means that a need to focus on innovation. Cost is still important, but we need to focus more on innovation. Why? Because outside there are more opportunities. Innovation is not going to be solely the coming from inside, but more and more it's coming from outside. To do this, purchasing teams need to develop a business mindset. They need to understand how the company is going to differentiate on its market in order to understand what type of collaboration can contribute to make this happen. And in purchasing, in order to contribute to innovation, we're starting to realize the extent that we need to both anticipate and accelerate. Anticipate in order to go very early in collaboration with supplier to understand the concept, the technology of tomorrow, but also sometimes accelerating, running some RFPs within a few weeks in order to be exposed to, new solutions and taking a rapid decision about their embedment into the company processes. And all this takes place in dynamic ecosystems where we need not just to look at classic suppliers, but a broader set of solutions and opportunities. So this is why we are not moving into purchasing and to innovation from a purchasing standpoint because we grew better, because we've developed our capabilities. We're moving in innovation because the structure of industries are changing and more opportunities for innovation are now outside of the company and no more inside of the company. And it's a collaboration. It's not just every innovation is going to come from outside. It is about bridging the gap between the inside and the outside. So that's just a picture showing the image of we're moving from this value chain where raw materials were shipped to component manufacturers, integrated by subsystem providers, and put into a final product by an OEM. Today we've got much more complex ecosystems with some of the company that are supplier, partner, but also customer, or simply influencing some of some of our clients. If you take the example of IBM, you go back 50 years ago, IBM was vertically integrated. It was, let's say it's an image going to the beach, getting some sand. And then in chemical units, it was chemical factories, it was processing the sand to turn it into silicium. And then turning the silicium into components, electronic components. And then turning the electronic components into a computer, putting software on top and selling that. That was IBM. They were doing everything from beginning to end. Today, they're just one layer, one service provider within a much broader ecosystems. And many industries, especially with the development of platforms, are now turning into much more complex ecosystems. So that's what we have in front of us. Now, what is innovation? So I'm going to try to go into some examples. So a few years ago, already more than 5 years ago, we wanted to put together this kind of picture. So this picture shows different types of innovation that supplier can contribute to. And this is a way of helping people in purchasing, trying to understand different types of contribution they can have to innovation. So let's look at, let's look at the first one at the bottom here. Rather classic one. This is all about risk. This is all about becoming more resilient as a company. But let me give you an example. Number of years ago, there were some issues, flooding in some countries, and hard drives manufacturers were unable to deliver products to their client because of flooding within their factories. And there was one company at that time that was making set-top box. So this is the internet box, and they were really relying on these suppliers in order to deliver their product to some of the big telecom companies. What was important here was they had established very close relationship with their supplier. So what happened was, as soon as the manufacturer of the hard drives in Thailand saw the flood coming, they called that client first. They said, hey, we're going to soon get into trouble because some of our manufacturing capabilities are flooded. And I was able to interview people all along the chain. What happened at that time? People from purchasing called people from sales. They said, suppliers is telling us that problems are coming. Then the people from sales say, let's organize a meeting together with the purchasing team, our clients, and the supplier, so we can quickly find a solution. Within a week, these meetings were organized, and companies like Vodafone, Orange were able to negotiate directly with supplier of supplier, the supplier, about how they would be securing access to internet box through these hard drives supply for the coming Christmas, because at that time a lot of these were sold for Christmas. And when I interviewed people in companies like Vodafone about this event, they said, you know what? Every time we have we need to revisit this market for set-top box, we always remember what this supplier has done for us. They really help us to manage the situation. They saved us from running out of internet box at a time where we needed to sell a lot of them. So by doing something quite special in terms of risk management, having this early engagement with supplier, close collaboration, they were able to contribute to secure revenue for their clients. And today, companies who have such capabilities that can be supported by purchasing have an advantage, a real business advantage. And this is something still innovative in many industries. It's not a common practice. So that's a way of contributing to innovation. Let me go further and look at another practice. And you see, I've described them as a sort of a surfboard. So, these are different surfboard, and depending of the waves you want to ride, you can pick the right type of surfboard. So processes. So, could take many examples across the many industries. But think of what's happening in the pharma industry today. Um, I'm working with one of pharma industry company, and they've established a special unit to work with startups. And the idea is to get access to startups so they can contribute to transform the internal process related to research and development. Send some machine learning into all their past data so they can, get some understanding of what would be the alternative effects and alternatives disease of some of the substances they've been looking at. So they have a wealth of data, they can look into, send some of these artificial intelligence algorithm in order to find some new correlation they didn't see in the past, which will be really contributing to have a much broader perspective on what works. Also, they're working with big companies, small companies on totally transforming how you test drugs. So this is one of the areas in terms of innovation, and purchasing is playing a key role in helping pharma companies getting access to these types of innovation. But of course, when you also implement some more, classic full process perspective analysis across your company, your suppliers, applying lean, for instance, this is another way to create value and to innovate in terms of processes that are shared across both company and impacting mainly on the efficiency. Offerings, for many, many years, we've known that automotive companies have been building on their suppliers in terms of gaining access to innovation. In fact, today, the major car makers, uh, they're not the one that are owning the most patents. This is actually their suppliers who are bringing most of the innovation in terms of the components that are going into the car, and also there's a broader development related to autonomous car, electric vehicles, and where a lot of it is not just bought by the OEMs themselves, the car manufacturer, but some of their suppliers. But you have that everywhere now. When you look at the electricity companies, distribution, production of electricity, and the distribution to the final customer, you see now what used to be regulated industry with a lot of internal innovation. You've seen over the years any utilities more and more access to external innovation. The development of the smart meters were done outside, sometimes in collaboration. Today they are being shipped from Asia in many circumstances. But today, for instance, in order to develop some of the new service for the client, in terms of being more capable of managing your own energy consumptions, for instance, they're going out to new suppliers, data scientists, specialists of um artificial intelligence and other technology that support them with this. So for these companies, this means going out and identifying unfamiliar partners. They don't have, all the expertise in-house to develop these, and they have limited expertise to even qualify these suppliers. So they need to go out and find the right partners for them by not just organizing classic qualification, but sometimes organizing some competition between them, providing them data and say, show us what you can do, develop a very quick concept as part of the RFQ. So we see that well beyond the classic industry where we used to see this and coming into areas where a few years ago we would never had expected a contribution from supplier to innovating product and services. Customer experience. So customer experience, let me take something that existed for many years as an example. Insurance company. Okay, let's say you're procurement director for an insurance company and your clients, they have an insurance for their car. And when the car breaks down, what's happening? The person in the car picks up the phone and calls. You think they talk to someone working for the insurance company? No, they talk to someone working for their suppliers. Then someone's coming to pick up their car on the motorway. Is this someone from the insurance company? No, this is, again, a supplier. Then they go to a garage, and again, this is a supplier, and then there is an expert coming to, hey, are we going to reimburse you for the problems you've been facing or not? And 1 out of 2 of these experts are supplier of the insurance company. So some insurance companies have started to work extensively with their suppliers in order to strengthen, develop a positive customer experience. And some of them have seen direct impact on sales. So by investing in the quality of the process services delivered by suppliers to the final customer, they've been able to create competitive advantage, increase of revenue for the business. Access to new market. So sometimes the role of suppliers, the role of purchasing is to help a company gain access to new geographic or new niche markets somewhere. Some examples, FMCG company located in Shanghai, for instance, but also they've done that in other places across the world. They've established a special purchasing unit to support e-commerce. So this purchasing unit has been able to understand all the contributors to e-commerce, from logistics to order management to the big existing players in China, and finding the right way to manage all the needed services to support e-commerce activities and develop their brand, develop the sales of their product into this market, at the same time accessing information from the market, from competitors. So what I like about this case is we're not just talking about the classic direct. We're really talking about a special team that's proud of saying we're in direct purchasing, and actually we're making contribution on the top line. We contribute to grow revenue through the sales on internet. So that's another example I wanted to share for this one. Then you can also work with suppliers to innovate your business model, innovate your business activities through the use of their brand. Okay, so sometime I'm going to a local restaurant, and this local restaurant is specialized in meat, and so you can go there, you can have a nice steak, and normally you don't really go there for the dessert. But what they've done is they've decided to buy expensive ice cream. And in front of you, there's an advertising for the ice cream coming from the supplier. So you can buy a Ben & Jerry ice cream, for instance. And what happened? They're paying expensive price for an expensive ice cream, but also for being able to put the brand on the table. And when you order, there's always someone says, "Oh, and I want one of these ice cream." And then at the table, everybody is starting to eat ice creams. So here, purchasing has played a role, not in advising to go for a cheap ice cream maker, but really to support the process of bringing on board a company that's delivering not just a good ice cream, but also its brand image. So this can influence customer to spend more inside the restaurant. At the very opposite spectrum, this is also something we see in the avionics industry. So sometime you've got some of the major players in Europe, you know, they have a supplier from the US. And what they realize is, okay, in Europe, they sell, you know, the system under their own brand to, let's say, an Airbus or a Boeing company. But then in order to sell in the US, what they agree is to, you know, sell it under the brand of the supplier in the US. So out of, you know, one classic buyer-supplier relationship, you know, you end up having a collaboration where you make the most of both brands in order to access two different markets and create, you know, more benefits, more volumes, more sales out of this type of collaboration. Going further, game changers. So a game changer in terms of innovation is really what we would see as a more radical, as a more disruptive type of innovation that are really changing how everybody is competing on the market, and would often, you know, just build on different elements that we've already identified. I think, you know, there's many examples of this. Some that have really changed industries. So, for instance, you know, for the airplane, they have an engine, and the maintenance of the engine, you know, you don't pay for, you know, time and materials for this, but this depends on a number of parameters like, you know, kilometers, number of flights, things like this. And this for the companies who are you know, selling this integrated service. This was ideas coming actually from suppliers who started to say, hey, you know, uh, instead of operating in a certain way, we could start to help you operate in a different way. And this led them to rethink their business model and put together a plan to understand if they own the data, if they didn't have access to the data, how they could be, you know, putting all the jigsaw puzzle pieces together in order to change the business model. But also you find some more basic situation where you can really change the game, the rules of the game, and have a game changer. For instance, one company I've been working with for certain recruitment, they've decided to totally change the way they recruit people from the company. Instead of depending on recruitment agencies, they've decided to disintermediate, and they've started to use some of the tools that the recruitment agency were using before, and they've, you know, trained people within their HR function to start again to do the recruitment themselves. The value of the intermediary, the recruitment agency, for certain type of recruitment was becoming so low that they could disintermediate, change the business model, and really transform by reintegrating activities internally and getting access to suppliers of suppliers, totally change some of the process they've been implementing. And now they're looking at, you know, new ways of attracting people, new ways of engaging people through games, gamifications, other type of things. So it's another case where this is not about the final product, this is not about the core business, but, you know, this is an opportunity to contribute to innovation. So I've really taken time to give you a lot of examples here, trying to convince you that wherever you are, whether you work on, you know, direct materials, whether you work in indirect, whether you support R&D, marketing and sales, operations, or general services, there are opportunities to innovate by working with the suppliers. It's always about finding the right problem inside and finding the right solution outside. It's something that's valid across the full business. Sometimes you will be bringing incremental innovation. Sometimes you will be bringing more radical innovation. And depending on the situation, you won't be applying the same process. You will take a different surfboard to ride a different type of wave. So your processes will need to adapt to these different situations. No questions? Don't hesitate. Let's keep going. How can we make it happen? So briefly, what we've developed a few years ago is a picture of the process. So we need to find unmet needs. So we need in purchasing to get closer to the users and the customers and stakeholders, business partners, in order to understand where are the problems, where will be future problems, for which we can start to look for solutions. Innovation is always about matching problems and solutions. And then another big element of the process, so we have this one, focusing on this, and now we've got this one, which is about finding solution outside. They can be coming from existing supplier, they can be coming from supplier. Yeah? And when you've got a problem and a solution, or sometimes you have a solution, you check if you have a problem that would need that solution, then you can start to bring the two together and start to involve the supplier in innovation. What it means in terms of evolution for finding unmet needs. Today we are asking for early involvement in projects, and what we tend to do is say, give me specification, I can challenge them. To bring innovation, we really need to go a step further. We really need to understand how we want to address the final customer, the client, and what would be the innovation priorities of the company. And we need to have this intimate understanding of the problems, the unmet needs of our stakeholders. We need to show empathy to them. We need to be close to them so we truly understand what can make a difference. And this is not by asking, functional specification or tell me what you need. This is really by asking, what is it that you do want to see happening? What's your worst nightmare? What could really be, keep you awake at night? Some of these types of questions. Now, finding external solution. Today, most of the purchasing process are about, let's try to focus on the existing supplier list. And if we go for a more collaborative approach, let's do that with our biggest, more strategic suppliers. Moving into innovation, we need to evolve our practice. We need to broaden the portfolio, have some suppliers that can contribute to cost through massification, but also have some suppliers that contribute to innovation. So have a more open way of looking at supplier segments so we can both contribute to innovation and to cost aspects, and innovation can sometimes be about cost as well, of course, but in order to contribute to the full company strategy. Here, it's not just about building on our power, on our volume. If you want a supplier to bring you their innovation, to be the first company they talk to about their innovation, it's not just about volume, it's not just about money, it's about being attractive. You need to make them, as a company, want them to work with you. If not, they will go to someone else. They have the choice. Okay? So, very important point. Even if you're their top supplier, their top customer in terms of volumes, they might decide to test their innovation with someone else and bring into a competitor because they might be easier to work with, more receptive to innovation, more open to think differently about how to handle some of the IP or some of these aspects together. So we need to understand how we can be attractive when we're moving into this. And sometimes we need to move beyond collaborating with the strategic partners and start collaborating with unfamiliar players. Unfamiliar players can be a startup, a very niche innovation company, but it can also be a tech giant, Microsoft, or it could be an alliance of 400 organizations working on, the development of new solutions for hyperscale server or whatever type of technology. So they're not about the specifics; they're about some of the existing supplier, key supplier, but about managing collaboration with other type of organization. I see a question. We've got Giuseppe saying, thanks, it's good to go, and you look further at the slide. Well, thank you, Giuseppe. Uh, what does it mean in terms of mastering these processes? Companies, we've done some research, we've published that. Companies that are excelling at the three practices here, finding unmet needs, finding external solution, involving suppliers in innovation projects, are companies that have better financial and economic performance goals, for instance, than their competitor. So here you can see it, and the top financial performers, they do much more of business model, game changer innovation. They do much more of product service differentiation with suppliers. So this is really a key element. Companies who are investing in innovating with supplier are companies who also have, a better financial and economic performance. It's not the only practice you need. You need to be outstanding at marketing, but they tend also to be the ones that have the best practice in terms of budget. How do they evolve over time? What we were able to show is, you still have a lot of organizations that have very basic level of maturity in terms of the three dimension. Typically, the first development are about showing your ability to access external solutions. So go to the market and find some innovation solution in the market and helping the company to integrate the supplier in innovation project. And when you've shown your ability to do this, then you've got the credibility to go further and to be able to really have high-level performance on the three dimensions. So the clustering we did has shown that, we've got 15% of the purchasing organization we surveyed that were still very, very basic. 49% that were ongoing. They could access innovation from the market and help bring innovative supplier into the internal collaboration. And 36% that were more advanced. So in the next pages, you will have access. I'm not going to describe them extensively. You will have access to some of the tools that we developed. So if we look at finding unmet needs, how do you do that? You need to develop this strong collaboration internally in order to get access to problems. Okay? So here, at the beginning of your journey toward innovation with supplier, you need to communicate. You need to tell everyone that this is part of your role. You need to say it's not just about doing the contract and talking about cost, but this is also about contributing to innovation. So you need to communicate about this is my job. You need to have pictures of the CEO, the CTO, the CMO, the CFO saying that, purchasing has a contribution to make here, a few quotes and go out and tell everyone that it's part of your job. Then they will start to involve you. But when you work on project with them, make sure you communicate not just about the cost impact, but also about the benefits for the business of bringing this innovation from suppliers. Show that you brought a lot of positive impacts well beyond the cost issue. This is a way to demonstrate to your stakeholders you understand their problem, you bring solutions for their problem, you care for them, and you deliver value to them. And then at some point, you need to stop promoting what you do, and you really need to understand who are the few stakeholders that are really influencing decisions, who are the few stakeholders that can help you to go out to supplier and explore what's coming from the market. And you need to let some of your internal partners to pass the good message about what you do within purchasing in order to help access with innovation. So you need to make that type of progress. At the beginning, you will be accessing to cross-functional activities. You will start to be part of the strategy development process of some sites or business unit. This will help you to access problems. Then you will be invited to longer term perspective in terms of technology roadmap, marketing roadmap, you will be invited to join some of the innovation team that will help you to better understand what are the plans in terms of future development. And you will be part in core teams that are really, giving you access to the full customer experience, and that will be looking at the emerging trends. And that's when really you can have the biggest perspective on what you need to go and find in terms of solution outside, because you understand the innovation priorities, you understand the problems of your internal stakeholders. So you can use this as a way to understand where you are, what you can do in terms of making progress. And we're just talking about finding unmet needs. Same in terms of finding external solutions, from focusing on existing supplier to starting to look further down in the value chain and really mapping the broader business ecosystems and really identifying some of the unfamiliar players. Where are you with this? Are you supporting the business at that level, at this level, or at that level? Is it systematic? Not just one case from time to time, but really a systematic thing that you support the business with. And it's all about finding solutions by interactions, organizing roadmap sharing sessions, organizing more workshops where your company stakeholders and the supplier can explore how to solve some of the problems and come up with some innovation. And a really dedicated process working with startups, unfamiliar players, new types of interactions you can develop in order to, create design solutions beyond the classic technology project and product development project. Finally, you will find one here that's really helping you to how to involve supplier in innovation project. So going from basic process improvement, product development activities to multiple dimension game changers. So measuring your maturity in terms of incremental versus more radical types of innovation, and thinking outcome in terms of the type of innovation that you can deliver out of this with bigger and bigger impact on not just internal processes, but also growing revenue and creating competitive advantage. You can use this, use that in team, okay? Build on that in order to, create a good understanding of where you are today and how you can make progress. Now, final comments, how to institutionalize that. Two things. The first one is you need to change the way of measuring the performance in purchasing. Of course, you still need to measure the productivity of the purchasing organization and the savings, but you need to maintain the communication on that purely to internal to purchasing and the CFO. Then you need to measure much more the impact of the solution you find outside on the satisfaction of your internal stakeholders, and you need to communicate on the benefits you bring to them. So you need to communicate more about the benefits of the innovation you bring from outside to the internal stakeholders. And then we need more positive communication that's going to help to change the culture internally, competition, internal awards, that really help to communicate about the good practice, to share some of the stories. That makes a difference about innovating with suppliers. Today, I've seen a lot of purchasing organization. They might do a bit of all these, but 90% of the focus is on the top. So I think the key is to balance 30%, 30%, 30%, and 33%. And then making sure also these elements are aligned. So by developing the individuals through recognition, sharing of best practice, we can better contribute to projects that deliver innovation to the stakeholders while contributing to the financial performance. So more balanced way of measuring, more focus on communicating the right message about performance to the right people, and more balance in terms of focus on the measurement, and more alignment across these measurements. Behavioral, communicate about the vision and your contribution to the vision, not just your contribution to the savings. Talk about the values. Talk about the values of the company, the values that support innovation, and how you demonstrate that you use these values. Act as role models at every level. We all need to be role models for others, and we need to find buddies to which we can provide feedback and get feedback from, so we can really contribute to understand if we're doing the right thing in terms of supporting innovation. Develop book of stories about what type of innovation you've been bringing from outside. Share them with the stakeholders, and create some form of ritual, some form of ceremonies where you celebrate your success, where you show what has worked and what behaviors have helped to make the difference. This is the only way, by changing the measurement system and by changing slowly the culture, that you will really be able to institutionalize fully the ability to innovate with suppliers. If you want to see more, you can join one of the class coming in May, 2 days, or over the summer for a full week. We would go into details about all the tools, all the techniques, but I won't have the opportunity to give you this overall perspective, to share with you a lot of examples, to make it concrete, to show that everybody can contribute, but that at the same time we need to change our ways of working and institutionalize that by changing the way we measure things and the way we bring the values to the forefront. I haven't seen one question, which is about, do you have any experience with acquiring EU fundings? I've seen some purchasing organizations building ecosystems in order to get access to some EU fundings. I think what's key here is collaborating with universities who have the experience of writing all the proposals for the different R&D funds, innovation funds that exist. This is not something you can improvise yourself as an expert. This is more something that can be done with some academics. Or I've seen some purchasing organization recruiting some academics to help them with that. So again, build an ecosystem with people who have the experience of doing this. They will help you to make that happen. For Nicola, that was asking. Running out of time, but if you have an extra question, happy to take it. Otherwise, go do it. You know, it's really exciting time, great opportunities to make things different. Thanks a lot for joining me this morning. If you have any questions, send them to me by email. I'll be very happy to answer. If you want to discuss more, don't hesitate to contact me. Really, I hope I've managed to give you an overall perspective, give you some hints, convince you it's important, and help you to start to see how we can go further by creating a more holistic capability for innovating with supplier in purchasing. Thanks a lot to everyone. Looking forward to see you with us one day, you know, through some exchange on LinkedIn or by email. Always a pleasure to share some of the findings from our observatory. Goodbye.